This week on BSD Now, Allan's currently at EuroBSDCon. However, due to the magic of video, or possibly time travel, you still get a new episode. You're welcome. Stay tuned for the latest BSD news on your place to be, SD. BSD Now, episode 160, EuroBSD Dreamin, recorded September 21st, 2016. Hey, I'm your host, Chris Moore.
And I'm Allan Jude.
Yeah, we're glad to have you guys with us this week. So, yeah, we lied. We're recording this a little bit early, so a little trickery there. Allan, of course, is at EuroBSDCon right now, so it's Wednesday. Let's see, you would have Tuesday. You'd probably be there by now.
Negative time. Yeah. I'd probably be asleep or something. I have no idea.
Yeah. Either way, the conference will probably just be getting started for you in the next 24 hours or so. The Dev Summit, I assume.
Yeah, doing Dev Summit too.
Of course. Okay. So we will look forward to hearing from you when you get back how that went. I expect a full trip report and bring some interviews.
I really hope to get us some interviews.
Yes, got to bring us some interviews. But either way, we still have lots of news to get to this week to bring you. So we're going to get right into that here in just a moment. But stick around for next week. It's always fun to hear the post-BSD conference wrap-ups. Yep. Okay, so let's hop into the news here. So we have some performance improvements for FreeBSD kernel debugging.
So if you remember Backtrace.io, who are people that we've interviewed in the past, they said previously they've looked at how user space core dumps work in FreeBSD. But Backtrace's debugging platform also supports FreeBSD kernel core dumps and the tracing features and so on. So while those two different core dumps are actually constructed somewhat differently, and in the process of adding support for them, we found a way to improve performance of automated programs accessing those core dumps. So a kernel core dump is typically only generated in exceptional circumstances. Unlike a user-land process, a kernel routine cannot fault without sacrificing the machine's availability, which is to mean if a program crashes, the program closes and you start it again. If your kernel crashes, the machine stops and you have to reboot. Right? Nobody likes that. This means things like page faults or illegal instructions inside the kernel stop the machine entirely, instead of just the one process. At this point, in most cases, it's only usable enough to inspect its state in a debugger or generate a core file. So a FreeBSD kernel core file can be formatted in several different ways. This depends on the type of core dump that is performed. A full core dump is an ELF file, kind of like a regular userland core dump, similar in structure. However, because people got more and more RAM, this is like 2006 when like a couple of gigs of RAM was a lot of RAM, it became difficult to, you don't want to sit there and wait while you write out 8 gigabytes of RAM to the disk in order to debug your crash. So in 2006, FreeBSD introduced MIDI dumps, which are much smaller without making the core file useless. And that became the default in FreeBSD 6.0. So with the MIDI dump, you get only some parts of memory that you might care about and like the output of like PS and a couple other things, all the state information. Sure. And it usually gives you enough to help you figure out what the problem was without having to write all of the memory to disk. Because, on some of my machines now, I have 128 gigabytes of RAM. I would like the machine to come back. If it crashes, I want to reboot and get back up, not spend a while writing out 128 gigabytes of RAM that I'm not going to look at, since most of it's like ZFS cache anyway. So this article...
Just get rid of all the noise.
The article goes into detail on what the MIDI dump format actually looks like. Like they actually break down like this is what the first 8 bytes are this and the next 4 bytes are that and so on. And then some basic debugging techniques. They actually show you like how to do some basic debugging with KGDB and the DDB and so on. But say libkvm will first determine whether the virtual address lies in the kernel or in the direct map. If it lies in the kernel map, libkvm will consult the page table pages to discover the corresponding physical address. If it lies in the direct map, it can mask off the direct map base address. If neither of these applies, then the address was illegal. This process is encapsulated in a function called VA to PA, which is physical address or virtual address to physical address. Once the physical address is determined, libkvm consults the core file's bitmap to figure out where in the core file that's located. Media dumps include a sparse bitmap, meaning that chunks of that memory won't be there. So indicating which pages were actually included and which weren't. The pages are dumped sequentially, and that's listed in the last section. Because they are sparse and not entirely predictable, figuring out the offset within the dump of a particular physical address cannot be reduced with a trivial formula, right? You don't because there's a bunch of chunks missing. If you want the 4th gigabyte of RAM, you can't just jump to 4 gigabytes into the dump file.
Sure. That's got to make it challenging.
And so the way it worked kind of made sense maybe with 8 gigabytes of RAM, but as you get more, it was really slow. And say for typical manual debugger use, the impact of this change is noticeable, right? Because you're only looking up a couple of pages at a time. But in their program where they want to figure out where everything was and try to reconstruct the state of the machine so they can figure out why it crashed, that was a big deal for them. So the article goes into details of how the lookups against the map are slow and how that could be improved. So they made their changes, and they say that, because in manual use this isn't very noticeable, the speed difference, it's probably why the hash table implementation has been used for the last 10 years. However, for any automated debugging process, the extra latency of each lookup adds up very quickly. On a sample 8 gigabyte kernel mini core dump, which is actually generated from a 128 gigabyte server, so its core dump is still 8 gigabytes at this point. The crash info program that runs after save core when the machine comes back up, it now takes 9 seconds instead of 44 seconds, and uses 33% less memory while doing it. And that's just the crash info program that's built into FreeBSD. For Backtrace's own thing, that was an even bigger improvement. So Backtrace says they began shipping a version of this performance improvement and ptrace in February of 2016, and that enabled them to offer significantly faster tracing of FreeBSD kernel cores to customers running current and older versions of FreeBSD. On July 17th of this year, that code was, and the improved libkvm scaling was committed to FreeBSD head and will become part of FreeBSD 12.
Nice. Oh, that'll definitely be handy to have. All right. Very cool.
Another good example of a vendor working on their product makes an improvement to FreeBSD that will benefit not just them, but everybody, and sourcing that back up to us.
Sweet. Okay, well, moving on to the next story here, we have OpenBSD has a GNZip pipeline tightening.
Yes.
It looks like they've done some work there. So what exactly did they do?
They have a new style of signing coming up. Kind of inspired by the problem that FreeBSD had with port snap in this issue, they found that OpenBSD was actually vulnerable to basically the same thing, which was the old pipeline was you fetch the data, you uncompress it, then you check that the resulting file has the right signature, and then you process the data. The obvious problem being that you just fed possibly bad data into gunzip, which if there's a bug in gunzip, then it could be exploited. So they're changing their process to fetch data, check the signature, then uncompress it, and then process the data. So their solution was actually to move the signature, which currently was done inside at the end there, and now it's going to move outside and as a comment in the gzip header, so that they can look at it without actually having to process the gzip header. So now, since step 1, which is downloading the data, is privilege separated, and step 2 is the one there where they're checking the signature, and they're hoping that'll be airtight, that will mean that step 3 and 4 are no longer vulnerable because no untrusted data will ever get to them. So the basic guidelines of their setup are make a small self-contained code to parse simple gzip headers, signify style signature in a gzip comment, which contains the checksum of every 64K block of the compressed archive. Don't even think about passing the original gzip header through unless the signature matches, and then use that as a pipeline step. All right, does not need to download the full archive to use it, and never ever pass any data to gunzip unless it's been verified. It also says, note that as far as he can tell, we haven't had any holes in their gunzip process, But he says, well, waiting for an accident to happen is not how we do things. Hopefully this will prevent any future mishaps.
Sure. Well, just, best practices here. Don't necessarily want to trust your decompressor is bug-free, right? Good stuff. Okay, well, I'm glad they caught that. And hopefully if anybody else still has similar processes in place, they will implement some kind of similar checksumming and verification before passing it along. Okay, well, next up we have some OpenVPN information to pass along. It looks like running OpenVPN on FreeBSD 10.3 specifically, which is nice. Something's actually current and updated because I know some of that info is kind of old. So you want to tell us what the user wrote about here?
OpenVPN changed the default version of EasyRSA from 2 to 3, and this basically invalidated all the old how-tos. And I know a couple of weeks ago, Adrian Chad was complaining about this because he was trying to get a VPN set up before he left for DEF CON because he wanted to be able to VPN home and not have all his traffic be attacked or whatever. And he was like, damn it, none of these guides have instructions.
We need to have like an expiration policy for blog posts and guides that say this is tied to this version specifically if it's, expires after a year. So, Anyway.
So this user says, while trying to set up OpenVPN, I noticed there was no up-to-date information with correct instructions. OpenVPN now uses EasyRSA 3 to set up keys, and it recently changed from version 2. As a result of this, the old steps to configure OpenVPN are no longer correct. I went through the process of setting up a VPN using OpenVPN on FreeBSD 10.3 and wrote down all the steps for you. So the tutorial walks through everything, installing the needed software, setting up the directory structure, configuring EasyRSA, setting up a certificate authority, building the server certificate, the client certificate, and the Diffie-Hellman parameters file, moving the keys to the right places, setting up an OpenVPN server config, an OpenVPN client config, turning on OpenVPN, setting up logging, and so on. And then it even has a bonus section at the end that deals with port forwarding, setting up your firewall, and doing dynamic DNS. So everything you need to do to get OpenVPN on a modern machine, and it looks like it's very nicely done.
That's nice. Yeah, I know I had to set that up a year ago, and I think I ran into the same problem. A lot of the tutorials all had bad information. In particular, I think I got tripped up on, like, some people were like, use TAP. Others were like, no, use TUN.
Yeah, there's a difference there. I forget. One. I think TUN is IP packets and TAP is Ethernet frames. And depending if you want to do bridging or not, it makes a difference.
Yeah, that was a total pain in the rear to figure out, like, who's right, especially when you have like two tutorials written around the same time that different methods.
For me, it was apparently I created my server certificate was missing one of the properties it needed. And so then it wouldn't work. And I had to figure it all out. And I'm like, trying to do this in a hurry because we're in the middle of moving from one data center to the other, and we want a VPN between the two data centers so that some of the machines are still accessible with their old IP addresses, even though they're not in that building anymore.
So my problem was I was always time crunched too, right? Because the only time I get interested in setting up my VPN was like the day before I had to leave to go to town or something. When I'm sure I have lots of other things to be doing. So it's like I just need a tutorial.
It's like I need to get this working and still remember to pack underwear.
That's right. So thank you for posting this. We appreciate it. It'll come in handy next time. Okay, so before we get to our next story here, we got our first sponsor this week, which we're going to be starting with IX Systems. Website for that, ixsystems.com/BSDNow, where you can go there, fill out the information, get in touch with the good folks over at IX, and let them build the next system for your data center, your home office, your office, etc. Yeah, it could be anything. They do servers, of course.
Do you want a little FreeNAS Mini for under your desk, a little 1U short depth router for your basement rack, or do you need like 8 racks full of gear for your data center?
Right.
Whatever it is.
Just petabytes of storage. Again, like they do everything in between, big, small, and they've done some wild systems over the years. I think they're going to do a new server envy blog post. When I was talking to the guys at VMworld, they mentioned it's about time to show off
something else crazy
gear they've built. Yeah. I'm sure they've done a few different things, so they just need to put some pictures up so we can talk about it.
Well, they could do one about just cramming all the stuff I needed into 1U box even.
That is
they're not especially impressive machines, but...
well, I'd like to see how the NVIDIA card ended up getting.
Yeah, well, it's just a weird motherboard where the expansion slot is right at the edge of the board and doesn't. It means the SATA ports don't poke up right into the fan of the video card, which is the big deal for us. But the big thing is, when we do these ads for all of the sponsors on the show, the big thing is that we were customers of all of these before they started sponsoring the show. And, we picked the place. Well, I guess you work for IX, so that's maybe a little different. But, I've been using DigitalOcean since, when FreeBSD was in beta, and they joined the show as a sponsor once it was announced. Now, Tarsnap, I didn't start using right away, although very shortly after. I knew about them and had meant to be using them. I should have been using them, but I was, slow.
Right. Yeah, now we can't imagine not.
But it's just, we're not just reading an ad here. It's that, these are actually the companies we use, and we like them, and we would, we know that if you try them, you will like them too.
That's right. So again, get in touch with those guys. Of course, built with the latest and greatest Intel processors, and we would be remiss if we did not mention, of course, MeetBSD is coming up here in November. So again, make travel plans accordingly. Go check out is it MeetBSD.com?
MeetBSD.com.
I always forget. Okay. Yeah, check that out and get signed up today.
You have to register before the end of September to get $30 off the price.
That's right. So you still got another couple weeks.
Well, no, because this comes out next week. So you only have like a week to register. So hurry up and do that.
Yeah, get that done. So, of course, we'll look forward to seeing you out there then. Okay, well, let's get into the next one here. So LSOP, what is this? This is a tool, I guess, that finally is going to make our lives easier.
Yes.
So why? Go ahead and tell us what the background is.
LSOF, which is list of open files. LSOP is list of obsolete something. I don't know. Yeah, old processes. So LSOP is a tool that a bunch of you have been asking for. A couple of weeks ago on the show, somebody wrote in and was like, so I ran FreeBSD update, and it updated, say, like OpenSSL to fix a bug or bind. And, it didn't change the kernel, so I don't have to reboot, but I don't know which other programs I have to restart to make sure that they're all running the newest version of OpenSSL.
Right.
So this utility is a FreeBSD utility to list all processes running with outdated binaries or shared libraries. So how does it work? LSOS iterates over all running processes and looks through the memory map files with read and execute access, and then checks if those files are still available or have been modified and deleted since. So to give you a list of all the processes where the library has changed.
Sure.
And so how would you use it? After you install a system update, like with FreeBSD Update, or you just run package upgrade and get newer OpenSSL package or whatever, it'll let you know which daemons need to be restarted to make use of those patched libraries and binaries. So
somebody needs to tie this into some sort of other script that does it automatically for you. Like, here, you've done an update.
Yeah, so that path, that means service, Nginx restart, and a couple others, yeah. And or even just something that monitors and just a Nagios alert goes off saying, hey, this thing's running an outdated binary, you probably want to fix it. So yes, big thanks to Bogdan Boyadahev for writing this much needed tool.
So just as an FYI, he does say it does not work when started in a jail.
Because it uses the kernel stuff to find this. It uses like procstat, and that accesses stuff that you're not allowed to do in a jail. But you can, I think you would get a list of the processes in the jail if you ran it on the host. So it will help you with your jails. You just can't run it inside the jail.
Okay, we're going to head into the news roundup. To start us off, we have an OpenBSD 2016 fundraising campaign status update. So they start off, it's over at BSD Mag, by the way. They start off by giving us a little bit of a recap on previous years. So it mentions that 2015 was a good year for the foundation financially, with 1 platinum, 1 gold, 4 silver, and 3 bronze donors providing half of our total donations. 680 individuals making smaller contributions provided the other half. While the total was down significantly after 2014's blockbuster year, we again exceeded our goal. So where are they for this year? So as of September 5th, they're at approximately 115K out of a total goal of about 250K. So almost halfway there. So, of course, come on, we're getting towards late September now. I know a lot of people donate at the end of the year, but we just want to remind you folks, if you're an OpenBSD user, contributor, company uses it, remember to try and send those guys a small contribution, or a big contribution if you can do it as well. But small amounts help. Of course, the money goes to help great causes such as the hackathons they put on, running the OpenBSD infrastructure and all the various maintenance and just keeping the servers lit up, right? That's important stuff too. So definitely get over on the website there, and you can set up a recurring PayPal as well.
That's what I have.
A little amount, but I know getting the total number of donors up is always good too.
So next up, we have a firewall script. So update FWBC.
So, yes, that's right. So network and sysadmins, of course, know sometimes when all else fails, you just got to break out the huge ban hammer. So in this case, sometimes entire countries get put on the excrement list until the attacks stop. So we have a handy GitHub project today, which is going to assist you in doing it exactly that. It's called the Update Firewall BC, which is Update Firewall by Country. So we have a little Perl script, which may be your savior when dealing with really bad instances that require major brute force. Specifically, though, this script works with IPFW, PF, and IP tables, which makes it able to run across quite a variety of BSDs or even Linux. So again, very cross-platform friendly. Basically, how it works is it's going to ingest a list of IPs that you feed it. So maybe you're getting IPs from another tool such as SSH guard or pick one, and it'll then determine what block the IP belongs to and matches that according to country and determines who the offending nation is. So then beyond that, there's a bunch of detailed setup instructions, which we'll walk through getting it configured for various firewalls. Also has some instructions specifically for FreeBSD. I guess there's a few packages you have to install before you deploy it. Although once you know those packages, I imagine using it on OpenBSD or any other BSD should be pretty easy to adapt because most likely be the same package you install there. But once you're set up, you can go ahead by banning large swaths of territory all at once, which I know that's old school me, Allan, that likes doing that. I just remember working at the ISPs back when I was younger. That was pretty frequent. We did that a lot. I won't mention countries, but many of them got put on the excrement for weeks at a time for being bad citizens. But anywho, if you need something like that, go check out the script today. Okay, so we got our next sponsor this week. We're going to be going over to DigitalOcean, website for that, digitalocean.com. And instead of some sort of /BSDNow, don't do that. Just go to digitalocean.com, create an account. After you create your account, there should be a section under accounts where you can add a coupon code. You're going to want to add FreeBSDNow as the coupon code, and that's FreeBSDNow, not just BSDNow. But that specifically is going to give you a $10 credit, which is good for running 2 months of their lowest NVM, a month of their next tier up, and so forth and so on. But what's really cool is even that lowest NVM is still backed by all SSDs. So great performance out of it, which is pretty nice. And of course, come on, 2 months from being able to run a VM for free to try it out, see what you can do with it is pretty slick. I know when I started, I ran 3 jails immediately in it because they support FreeBSD natively, and they had all the instructions on how to set that up and share an IP address and all that. It was really handy. I enjoyed reading their docs. So there's been a couple times I've just been Googling how to do something on FreeBSD, and a DigitalOcean guide comes up, which is pretty cool that they
do a good job with those
put that much info out there. They do. They really do a good job with that.
And they have lots of features, including floating IP addresses, which allows you to have a static IP address that you can move between your different droplets. So you can do failover or just move your website while you're upgrading and stuff like that. It really helps. They give you full reverse DNS management, so you can have the nice name on your machines. You also have private networking. So while you get quite a bit of bandwidth, even the $5 one includes 1 terabyte of data out to the internet. If you're talking between your droplets, you can do it over a private network and not use up that bandwidth. They have the full 4 nines SLA, making sure that your droplet's always available, and lots of locations, including New York, San Francisco, Toronto, London, Frankfurt, Amsterdam, Bangalore, and Singapore. And they have a little speed test app, so you can try each of those and find which one's the best for you.
Which was important when I was setting up my Mumble server. I had to know which one would give me the best latency. So that's really handy, and you should.
And they have a full API that's really nice, so you can do any of this, from the command line or with the script or automatically, whatever you need to do.
That's right. That's right. So check them out today, folks. DigitalOcean.com. Okay, so more utilities via more utils. Wait, is this another less and more thing?
This one actually doesn't have anything to do with more. At first, I thought it was a more package, but no. So, in most of the BSD, the core set of utilities and commands you get are part of the base system, and you don't have to think about them. That's true on Linux, although on Linux, they're because there is no base system, they're provided by a package called core utils. Which is all the core utilities. However, Linux and now FreeBSD now have a package called More Utils. This provides a number of interesting additional basic utilities that aren't part of your typical Unix. The first one is called chronic. It allows you to run a task via cron tab, but it eats all the output if the exit code of the command is a success. So you run rsync verbose, and it will output all the stuff it's doing, but chronic will tell, okay, rsync finished successfully, so I'll eat all the output and cron won't send you an email. But if there is an error, you'll have all that verbose output and it'll get emailed to you.
I actually want that. That sounds good. That would be very helpful.
The next one is called combine. It basically does a Boolean operation. So it takes 2 text files and will output only lines that appeared in both of those text files.
Well, it's binary as well, though, not just text.
And it does that. The next one is error no, which is very handy. It basically lets you turn an error number into the actual name. It's always annoying when an application just says like error 17 instead of converting that number into the right thing. If data is a script for processing the output of ifconfig. Like, we've all done the ifconfig grep inet or whatever just to get the IP address. Well, if you do if data minus a and the interface name, it will give you just the address. Or I think if data minus p will give you just the MAC address, and so on. There's another one.
That begs the question, why doesn't just ifconfig support that directly? Like, that just seems like... but then again, it has like a zillion flags.
Yeah, and I added some more. In FreeBSD 11 and 12, it can do output the subnet mask in regular, like, dotted quad notation or in CIDR notation instead of just hexadecimal. Makes system in life much easier. The next tool is ifne, which is if not empty. So it allows you to, run a find or whatever, and then pipe that into ifne and then a command, and it will only run that second command with if the input on standard input was not blank. So it allows you to...
So if I found something.
If there was any output, do this. If there wasn't, don't do it. Then there is UTF-8. Just checks if the standard input or a text file, it contains UTF-8. Lockdo allows you to run a command while holding a lock. So this way, you set up, your backup script or whatever. You run it through lockdo so that if you set it to run once an hour, if the current run is still going because, you made a lot of new files today and it took more than an hour to back them up, it won't start the second time, or it'll wait until the previous one finishes to start.
I have a lot of rsync jobs that would benefit from that. That's good.
Then there's mispipe. Normally when you pipe, command pipe second command, the exit code you get is that of the second command. But sometimes you just want to know what the exit code of the first command was. Yeah. So if you do mispipe first command, second command, the exit level of mispipe is actually that of the first command. Because, if you're doing the first command, which is actually what you're doing, and then the second command is filtering it, you want to know whether the first one completed successfully, not whether or not the filter found anything.
Sure.
So there's that. Parallel, which you just give it a bunch of commands and it will run them all in parallel for you. It's cool. Then there's P, which is a version of T, except for it writes the output to a pipe.
Bunch of multiple pipes.
So it allows you to...
So it's the opposite.
Yeah, so basically, if you run P and then program and then a list of programs, the output of the first program is sent to all the other ones instead of only one. It's like, if you ever wanted to have, like, fork your pipe and have two, that's what this does.
I'm sure there's some use case for that. I don't know what
There's once or twice where I've come to the point where it's like, I kind of want that. Usually when you end up, like, writing it out to a file and then reading that file twice. But then they have sponge. Soak up standard input and write to a file. So when you run the sort command on a file, you get the output. But you can't just redirect the output back to that same file name because you're reading from that file and you'll get the error. But Sponge lets you do that. So if you sort file pipe sponge file, it sponges it all up, and then once it's done reading from the file, you can just safely write it all out. Yep. Then there's TS, which basically adds a timestamp to each line. So by doing this, you basically get your logs with the timestamp of each line as it gets printed.
I think some of our build processes could use that. That would be helpful.
VIDIR, open a directory in your text editor. So it takes a snapshot of what your directory looks like and prints kind of the output of LS in VI, and then you edit it, and when you save, it matches that up with what it was originally and renames the files and directories to the names you've changed them to.
Oh, that's cool. Does it delete things too?
Yeah, it can delete things too.
Dang, that's cool.
And so, but in particular, if you want to rename a bunch of files with a pattern or something, using the regular expression and search replace stuff that's built into VI is so much faster than renaming a bunch of files, right?
Yeah. Now, this next one I definitely would use.
Vipe, which is VI pipe, basically. Sort my file, pipe, vipe, pipe head means the output gets dumped into a text file, which you VI, you edit, and then the output of that actually gets sent to the next command. It allows you to edit in the middle.
A lot of cases where it's like, take some output, vipe it, and then send it to XR to do something with it when I'm done, right after I've massaged it. That's really cool.
And then finally, we have zrun. So there's tools like gzless, which allows you to run less on a gzipped file, right? Works great for looking at compressed log files, or bzless or xzless for those ones. But what if you need to run a command that doesn't have one of these built-in versions of gzip less, right? Like gzcat and so on. So zrun, basically you give it zrun, a compressed file, and then a command. It uncompresses the file and runs it into the command for you.
Okay.
So yeah, just install the More Utils package and you'll have access to all of these handy dandy tools.
When is that going in the base? Are these BSD licensed?
I don't know.
Okay.
But yeah, so it says it just goes to show the power of the original Unix philosophy. Small tools that do one thing very well. And by just chaining a bunch of those together, you can do such useful and powerful things.
Sorry, I'm on a mission now to see what the license is for this. I'm looking. Let's see, version 0.6.0 came out. Put the license on the website. I don't want to look at... it doesn't have a web browsable Git repo.
Oh, it's terrible.
Yeah, okay. Anyway, I'll take a look at that a little later. But hopefully it's BSD license. That's really cool. All right, moving on to the next story here. We have OpenBSD SNI support has been added to libTLS and also HTTPD in current.
Yes.
We have a link to the Undeadly article.
Yeah, so libTLS, which is LibreSSL's improved API that replaces the standard OpenSSL API, now has a set of functions to implement SNI, or server name indication. Until a few years ago, each different website you wanted to host with HTTPS required its own unique IP address. And this is the main reason why Scale Engine didn't offer HTTPS for most of our customers, because it would just take an extra IP address on every one of our 100 servers, which is a lot of IP addresses.
Sure.
So that meant your typical way of HTTP virtual hosting didn't work. So the way regular HTTP worked was the URL you type in your browser, it sees the host part of that and includes it in a header in HTTP 1.1 and later when it sends to the web server. And the web server can look at that and know which site you want, and so it knows which directory to look in on the web server and return you the right content, allowing multiple sites to be hosted on one IP address. This doesn't work with SSL because that header's encrypted. You connect, you're only talking encrypted, and you haven't told us which site you want yet. How do we know which certificate to send you to prove we're that website? And so there would only ever be one per IP address. Eventually, they finally figured out that they should fix this. So the TLS standard was updated to include the host name of the site the user is requesting as part of the TLS handshake. So when you say hello to a server that say, hello, I want to do encryption, you also include the host name of the site you want to talk to. The server can then look at its list of certificates, find the one that matches that, and send you the right certificate, and you have your encrypted conversation with the proof that that's the right website. So now with that, the web servers need to have support for it. So the new API includes the ability to provide additional key pairs rather than just one via the TLS config add key pair from a file or from memory. And then also to allow the server to determine the server name that the client requested via the TLS-con server name. So you can look at the server name and then load the right certificate for it. And make sure you also serve the right content, which is kind of important. So this is much easier to use and therefore safer and less error-prone than the OpenSSL API for doing the same thing, because it was kind of bolted onto their already gross API. So the libTLS API is used in a number of OpenBSD tools, including their HTTPD and RelayD. So it means that the OpenBSD HTTPD now actually supports doing SNI and hosting multiple sites over TLS on the same IP address, which is very handy if you, for example, have a DigitalOcean droplet that only has one IP address.
Yeah, that would be very helpful. Wonder if I may need to... Again, another reason I need to play with this. Maybe switch. I got a few sites that could benefit from. So now we're going to head over to the BSD bits. So we're going to rapid fire these at you guys. So we're going to be starting with OpenSense announces a new core team member. It looks like Sean Webb of the Harden BSD teams now joined the OpenSense core team. So congrats to Sean for making it onto that team. That's great. Let's see. Next up, how to install 2.11 BSD on a simulated PDP-11. That's, yeah.
In case you want to do that.
In case you want to do that, you can now, which, you know, hey, maybe you're a college student and it's a project or something. That's cool. But
if
anyway,
you just like old things, I guess.
If you like old things, there you go. Next up, OpenBSD Puffy Needlepoint Pixel Art. Are you showing that on the screen, Allan? That's pretty cool.
Nicely done.
That is. Can you get these things? Like,
I think this person just did this one for themselves.
There's a business opportunity here, I'm telling you.
That FreeBSD pillow is very popular.
See, we'll know we've gone all commercial when you go to like BSD conferences and it's people at booths like hawking their little wares and stuff like that they've made. Buy my PSD throw pillow. I would have bought one.
I have one.
See? You're killing me. All right. Anyway, next up, Pulse Audio has been removed from D ports, which is the Dragonfly BSD ports. So it looks like they have just ditched it entirely. Okay. Good to see.
It's causing
I imagine they're patching
CPU
everything as it comes in.
and other problems, so they're just like,
okay, well,
get it out of here.
Get it out. Maybe FreeBSD will do the same at some point. That would be nice.
Don't we use Pulse Audio to make Firefox work properly?
We do. I know it's been patched. Recently it did get fixed. It just was broken for a while and Pulse was needed, but now I think with OSS it works again. So like that's like WebRTC stuff. Okay, next up, PFSense 2.4 pre-alpha is now available for testing, which is based on FreeBSD 11.0. You need to check that out. We have a link to the blog post talking about that.
Yeah, lots of other
give that a whirl.
Cleanup, including rewriting the captive portal software for it to work with stock IPFW instead of needing custom patches. Otherwise, just getting everything running nicely on FreeBSD 11. Also updating MPD from 4 to 5. And lots of improvements to the PHP code and, again, moving more towards using stock packages instead of custom stuff.
That kind of inspires me. I might need to do that for FreeNAS. Have like an 11.0 early version we can start tinkering with because I would like that.
Yep.
Anyway,
well, especially
no promises. Don't hound me on that.
Well, because if you're going to do that, to go with 12, and then you would get the... Well, I guess by the time you get to doing 11, I imagine the ZFS features will be merged back, so it'll be fine.
Hopefully.
But anyway, if you're interested in checking that out, that's cool. I'm really looking forward to when they finish this project and PFSense will just be a package you can install on top of FreeBSD.
That would be nice. And last up, we have a call for testing, Beehive HDA sound emulation. That's a biggie. I'm looking forward to that.
This is the result of a Google Summer of Code project. So it's good to see those actually producing useful results. But yeah, this will allow you to play sound from Beehive. So now that you have Windows and sound, I'd love to see this getting worked out by people.
Yeah, all of a sudden playing games and stuff. So I imagine it's just routing sound to OSS on the host or something like that would be my guess.
I'm not sure.
I think that's how like VirtualBox does it. So that is really cool though. That could, like I said, all of a sudden you can play Windows games or watch videos in a Beehive.
Yes,
very cool.
It's like that'll work for Netflix for now.
Right? That is true. That is true. Okay, so before we get to feedback and questions, we're going to do our last sponsor real quick, which is going to be TarSnap. So, of course, you've heard us talk about TarSnap an awful lot. Me and Allan both use it. You should be too. If you haven't, shame on you. You need to be doing some kind of backups. And if you're going to be doing backups, you might as well just do it safe and secure and just do it right the first time as opposed to doing it wrong for years and then having to do some expensive, costly shift later to change over and move to TarSnap. Just do it right out of the gate, guys. So TarSnap, of course, gives you the source code, which is really important because they make some really big claims about how nobody can steal your data. Only you have access to the encryption key and whatnot. And lo and behold, it looks like the source code bears that out. Feel free to audit it if you don't believe us or if you don't trust the authors. I mean, that's why they post it. And you can even compile it yourself from source. So,
so
if you don't even
no blob you don't
really
have to trust.
That's right. That's right. So definitely do that. I mean, if you're not quite that paranoid, of course, TarSnap's available on most package systems for just about every BSD, Linux. Heck, they got Windows packages, etc. So you can go ahead and grab it today and start doing your backups properly, effectively, and really cheaply.
That's even in the chat rooms where he says, "I really need to start using TarSnap." It's like, well, the question isn't will you lose some data at some point. The question is when will you lose the data, and the answer hopefully isn't the day before you started using Tarsnap. So start using Tarsnap today.
Yes. Just take our advice. Do it today. We'd rather you come tell us later, like, I'm so glad I started using Tarsnap because you guys recommended it before I had this catastrophic loss or the house burned down.
Yes.
Or something, right?
It's if nothing ever went bad and I never needed my Tarsnap, I really wouldn't miss the 74 cents that I've spent.
Right. So anyway, get signed up today, folks. Don't delay, don't wait. And I'm looking at you in the chat room. Come on, it's time. Make that account.
Literally, go to there, click, you're done.
You'll be done making the account
easy
before we finish reading the next question that we're going to do for the feedback and questions. So this is really simple. Speaking of which, let's jump on over to that. So we have Matthew who writes in, says, hey guys, recently it was brought to my attention that there are potential corruption issues related in the whole birth feature of ZFS when sending incremental snapshots. And then he lists some pull requests on the OpenZFS project. He said, I use FreeNAS at my work and send hourly incremental snapshots offsite. I'm wondering if I should be worried about the reliability of these backups. I don't know if any of you guys know enough about this particular issue, but would appreciate any feedback.
I'm not that familiar with this particular issue, but in particular, holes are only used for sparse data. So that's basically when you have a chunk of data where there's no data, and instead of having to write a whole bunch of zeros and transfer them, ZFS can just say, all right, there's a hole there. And the whole birth was just keeping track of when that hole got introduced, so the incremental knows, oh, I don't have to deal with that. Because originally the holes didn't have a birth time, and so might have to be sent every time you do an incremental, and that wasn't very helpful. So unless you're using a bunch of zvols where you're trimming stuff or you're creating sparse files, then you won't have any holes, and this probably won't be an issue for you. So on your FreeNAS, you're probably okay. Especially if you're not creating a bunch of sparse files like hosting VMs or so on. Although it might be at some point. I
will nag the FreeNAS guys, though. Make sure that any of those fixes have been pulled in. Usually they're pretty good. I know I just talked to one of the devs Monday, and he said we were now caught up to OpenZFS entirely. So it might already be in the next upcoming FreeNAS.
But yeah, I wouldn't be too concerned about this particular issue. And it seems it only affects if you make heavy use of holes in your data, which you probably don't.
Okay. So next up we have Hunter. This is a short and sweet one. He says, for the love of all that is holy and righteous, please have control on ASAP to light fire to systemd mount. That sounds like it could be a very interesting segment.
I have a short list of other things to talk to him about. The other one that came up recently with me and systemd, I was working on one of our Linux transcoders, and its init ramfs thing didn't have support for the file system I wanted baked into it, and I had to re-roll it, and all these problems. So I make all these changes. I'm basically in their version of single user mode, which for systemd is this weird thing. Anyway, you're done, and you type reboot, and it's like, sorry, you can't do that. That transaction is destructive. I'm like, I don't know what that means, but I would really like to reboot. Like, shut down -R force. And it's like, nope. I'm like, okay, so I have to power cycle you. Is that really the right solution here? Silly Linux.
Oh, that's horrible.
Yes. So terrible.
Then you resort to using IPMI to shut it up.
Yes, IPMI to power cycle the damn thing.
Is that what you did? Oh, man, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Systemd, why do you hate us so much?
Yes.
Okay. Anyway.
Next up, Anonymous writes in about Cool and Quiet, which is AMD's version of basically speed stepping, I think. So he says, first I wanted to thank you all for taking the time to produce these episodes. I've been using FreeBSD for about a year now, and I just stumbled across these episodes yesterday. Oh, well. You got a lot of catching up to do. He says they are truly educational, and the interviews are very interesting. I heard you talk about people that are working on getting the graphics stack updated, and it will be important for those with newer Radeon cards. You seem enthusiastic about this work. There is currently a review out where Anthony has created a patch to ensure that throttling, aka power now / cool and quiet, for AMD CPUs that are often paired with these GPUs on a single chip function, they work correctly. I was wondering if you might know the correct people to ping about this, because it's quite a few CPUs. I think it would be beneficial to get it into the tree and have people with their AMD hardware, specifically with proper graphics support, coming down the pipe. Yes, I think what would help with that is anybody who does have one of these AMD GPUs, apply the patch from that review and try it. And if it works, comment, or even if it doesn't, explain why in that review, so that there's a bit more information. The main problem is that most of the developers I know have Intel laptops, and so can't test this, and I wouldn't be comfortable committing something that might break or slow down everybody's AMD. So we'd like more user testing. The other thing is that subsystem was Colin Percival when he originally developed it, because his laptop was burning his lap. But that was many years ago now. And so it seems like maybe we need a new maintainer for the power throttling stuff. But if you can get people that have AMD hardware to test that, then I will help run down the right people and make sure that gets committed, because I know TrueAS would like that as well, I'm sure.
Yes, we definitely appreciate having that. Okay, next up, Nathan writes in. He says that interview with Mike Geiger was pretty good, as was the video from the Linux Action Show guys 9 months ago, where they showed around a WISP. He says, show suggestion, a tour of a Server North data center.
Server North data center wouldn't be very interesting, I don't think. They're very small and don't, well, not very small, but maybe it's just my stance because I deal with so much bandwidth nowadays. They don't have all that much bandwidth. I don't know how many machines they have, but we could try to do a scale engine one at some point, I suppose. We only have one rack of stuff, but
sure,
it's
I did
hundreds of terabytes
2 years ago of a data center in the Bay Area, and part of the problem with that is there's so much security, and you're not allowed to take pictures of anything. And as the tour guide was pointing out, like, that's so and so company's stuff here, that's so and so, and like, you're not allowed to photograph any of that, right? So that may be somewhat difficult. But if you can work it out, Allan.
Yeah, I know definitely the 151 Front Street data center has a strict policy of no photos, let alone videos. Yeah. So tour is kind of more difficult. But Q5 says, well, we could always tour the data center that's in my basement, I suppose.
That's true. A little bit shorter.
It's not as pretty, but it is a bit quieter.
That's true.
But yeah, we'll try to put something together and show off some of my stuff anyway.
So last up here, we have Chuck, who writes in, looks like some concerns about DigitalOcean with OpenBSD encryption. So he said somebody posted to the mailing list here talking about third time running OpenBSD 5.9 stable branch and a simple reboot ended up with a non-bootable OS. So I'm not quite sure if that ever got resolved, but thank you for the heads up. We appreciate the info. I imagine somebody's looking into that.
They don't fully support OpenBSD, but it probably... they're just running it in a VM, so I doubt there's anything specific that they're doing that would cause the problem. I don't know.
I can't imagine so.
But, you could use that console, install FreeBSD with full disk encryption to see if it breaks.
Yeah, to see what happens. Yep. But I don't know if you have a follow-up on that. If you ever do track down what the problem was, we would like to hear. In particular,
now that they have FreeBSD droplets with ZFS, you can definitely detect anytime data is going squirrely.
That's true. That is true. Okay, so it's time to wrap it up here for the week, folks. So, of course, Allan's still at EuroBSDCon. We'll look forward to talking with you next week when he comes back and hear how that trip went. But as we wrap up, we want to remind you of the email address, which is feedback@bsdnow.tv. That's where you want to send everything. Yep. Please do that. Don't send it to us on, YouTube comments, Twitter, etc. I mean, you can, but we just may not see it, and it won't get recorded and get put in an upcoming episode. So, of course, if you have questions, if you have a comment, if you see a show idea like, oh, they should talk about this, or a story, if you know somebody we should interview, send that info into feedback@bsdnow.tv. We would appreciate that, and we'll make sure it gets into a future episode. And, of course, don't forget, MeetBSD is coming up soon. So try and get reserved for that. You got about a week. So for the early registration, which will save you about $30. So definitely get signed up soon. We'll look forward to both of us seeing you there.